Hey everybody, James, and we are doing some kennel cleaning today. Try to get y'all a bit of an optimized view here. I'm gonna be pulling those kennels out, so they'll be out of the way in a second. But this is my normal Friday routine. Move everything out of the garage, sanitize it, keep it nice and clean in here for the dogs so they don't get sick. Back in the military, this was our standard practice on Friday. GI Day, it was a blast. Everybody going to the kennels, had music playing. Everybody get the kennels all cleaned up. Usually somebody'd light the barbecuer. It was a good time. It's predicated, of course, on a week of good training and productivity. We didn't get stuff done. We didn't get to play and party. It was just cleaning and then back out into the yard to get back to work. But fun times. And so it's something that I keep going now. Just feels relaxing to do kennel sanitation on a Friday. I figured I'd share it with everybody today. Sorry, it's a little bit loud sometimes. Just got to get everything kind of out of the way because I'm about to spray out where the kennel area is. Be scrubbing and sanitizing. So kind of got everything out of the way there. See if we can get Denver over there kind of in the shot too. Bam, there she is. Excuse me. Something I was going to jump on here and talk about today was why dog training doesn't work. And not in the sense of like we can't train dogs to do stuff. And I made a video about this a while ago, but it's a kind of continuous theme that I run into when I talk to people, whether it's fellow dog trainers or just frustrated pet owners. And the sentiment is that, you know, dog training doesn't work. And part of the proof is in the pudding for that, so to speak, is that the dog, you know, may in fact actually listen in one environment. Like here, for example, where I do a board and train, the dog might very well listen in this environment, but then they go home and it doesn't stick. It doesn't work anymore. And so the difference and why it doesn't work is, the trainer, we've spent a lot of time learning how to, provide structured interactions and environmental consistency to produce a certain outcome. Whether that's we're talking about, sport dog trainers training for whatever their respective discipline is, or we're talking about pet dog trainers trying to just teach dogs how to be calm. Generally, if you're boarding and training with that person, using them as your source of trying to chase that or get that product or that result, and usually you'd want them to be kind of delivering something that looks like what that end goal is. And so if the goal is for the dog to be calm in the house, yield to the leash, went out on walks in public, and just generally be a cooperative companion, a lot of that isn't what we see on the internet today in the super flashy or elaborate training stuff that a lot of trainers like to post. And so what happens is we'll go out and we'll teach the dog something new, whether it's nose work stuff, bite work stuff, whatever. And we'll see on the days that we do those things for an owner that's just looking for a little bit of relief from a dog that's got a bunch of energy. At first we'll see that whatever that game is, or that new thing that we're introducing is, it's really fun, it's really engaging to the dog because it's new. They enjoy some early success at it. Maybe we both do, so it's really fun early and often. But then as it becomes easy, it kind of becomes routine. And when it becomes routine, that's when it starts to get boring, and that's when the dog's like, yeah, I'm kind of over this. And so what we were doing no longer has the same effect, and so we have to find something new. And that's where we end up chasing our tails, so to speak. LOL, I made a joke. Chasing our tails, so to speak, trying to figure out how to just keep this animal manageable, and experiencing maybe some short-term relief or some short-term success. But in the long run, we still have a dog that as soon as we get them back to the house, they're like, all right, what's next? I want to go play ball. I want to run. I want to jump. I want to jump on you. I want to jump on the furniture. I want to eat the furniture. And so one of the big, like the $1 million question is, well, how do you teach a dog to chill or relax? And a lot of trainers are on to, some version of tethering, like what you see me doing back there. Instead of it being, a leash where she's actually physically staked out, I've got her in a kennel where she can observe what I'm doing. And then I also have a treat and train. I call it Wally. And so while she's in there, I can remove myself from her reward process or her reinforcement process by when she actually, lays down or offers some sort of a behavior that's consistent with a calm, relaxed state of mind, and I can reinforce that with Wally. That removes me from the equation where she thinks that, she has to do something for me. She needs to just do it because it's the right thing to do. And as she realizes that, which she's pretty good at this game by now, they start going over there and they start like proactively trying to chill, which is kind of the first step in being able to get dogs to do that when they get back to their house with the owner. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, like I said, kind of what discipline we're working on, whether it's working dogs, pet dogs, sport dogs, whatever. All any trainer can kind of show you is A, what works for them, and then B, what, based on what they do or what their skill set is, how does that work with the dog or with your dog specifically if they, take them in a board and train. And so that's one of the things I tell people when they come over for the board and train is, I can't guarantee that when your dog comes home, they're going to listen to you. I can guarantee that before your dog comes home, they will know how to listen, but you're going to have to provide, the structure and the consistency and the follow through similar to what I had to do here to create the understanding for the dog that, yeah, it's fun when we do these things, but there's also times where certain expectations are non-negotiable. Like we're out at the park and I need you to recall so I can put you on leash. It's not time for you to run around, get all excited and, try to escape. Denver, looking at you here, you husky. But all of that starts with just, being able to teach the dog how to not be so responsive, or I don't want to say reactive, but so interested in what's going on in the environment around them. Instead, a lot of times we as the human, we make the dog, kind of deliberately, but also we don't necessarily understand the depth to which it happens, which is where like a lot of separation anxieties come from. But we make ourselves the center of the dog's universe we bring the puppy home, separate it from all of its litter mates and its mom and everybody that it's known its whole life. We bring it home, we shower it with affection and love and food and all of the things. And so it learns, comfort with us. And back before, that thing that happened a few years ago where everybody got locked inside, it wasn't as prevalent where dogs had separation anxiety because everybody was just kind of going to work, and that was a societal norm. The dog would, go into their kennel or whatever their space was that they'd been designated, and they would just hang out there until the people got home from work. And that was, kind of normal. I remember when I was a kid, a lot of people didn't even have fences for their dogs, but their dogs knew to stay in the yard. E-collars weren't really a thing yet. And so as times have changed and society has changed, so too as, how the dog perceives what's going on in our world. And, something that people don't really think about is like we humans don't even always do well in the world that we've created for ourselves. So, if the dog is having some apprehensions or struggles because they don't understand, what their expectation is, because, 4,000 years ago, we bred them to do a certain job. And then now, we don't need them to do that job anymore, but we'll take them across town and they'll see a whole bunch of different things that they were back in the day bred to kind of drive away, right? If we're talking about, Malinois, Shepherds, any of those guardian breed type dogs, Rottweilers, Cane Corsos, they weren't meant to go out and socialize with everything. They were meant to get a herd of animals from point A to point B and not let anything eat those along the way. So, they're not meant to, go out to star babies and go to the dog park and see everybody. If anything, that's kind of unnatural. Like you don't see dogs on National Geographic, wolves, for example, meeting up at territorial boundaries and having potlucks. It's just not a thing. For pets, we see that, socialization, can be something that pets can respond or do well with. That's why obviously like cities and counties still put in dog parks, like enough dogs enjoy them and it's not enough of a liability yet that they haven't shut it down. But I don't know, I haven't been by a dog park where I don't see them getting into a fight or see a fight in there. I don't ever go in, but we do a lot of training outside of the dog park to use other dogs barking at dogs that I'm training with as a distraction. And so as the dogs that I'm working with are learning that, again, they don't need to be as concerned about the environment around them, we're desensitizing them, same as I'm doing with Denver here, showing her that she doesn't have to necessarily be involved in the chores that we're doing. Once the dog kind of learns those fundamental lessons, then, they're happy to, chill out per se. But a lot of times the misunderstanding comes from, 20 years of everybody thinking that everything a dog does is dominance, when it's really just insecurity. And then unfortunately, we put these dogs in really uncomfortable positions, take away their ability for fight or flight, and then we're surprised when they chomp the shit out of us. And so on one side, as an old canine trainer that used to have dogs like Keto that you had to watch out for that would actually bite the shit out of you, and you had to develop a cooperative relationship because that dog's just not going to tolerate you trying to alpha roll them and all that silly nonsense that you see these dipshits on the internet do. But once you get a good relationship with them, they're happy to work for you and do whatever you need. And so it's not about, like I said, establishing dominance and getting the dog to push through it. It's about showing the dog what the actual expectation is and not necessarily everything I don't want you to do. Because if, the dog's predisposition is to bark and you tell him that he can't bark, well, of course he's going to start pacing because he doesn't, have an outlet for that energy. And he's never been shown to, settle down or to chill out or where to actually, put that displaced energy. So like I said, one of the reasons how that transfers to dog training not working is because, we can create this understanding or this association in one location. But then the problem is we transfer to an environment where the dog already has maybe some bad habits or some pre-existing some pre-existing kind of reservations about something. You know, I'm thinking about like Home Depot, for example. You get a puppy that you take there when they're 4 or 5 months old. You get them all of the shots and everything, so you're able to take them out and socialize them, because that's what everybody says that we need to do. And so you take your puppy out to Home Depot, and because it's a puppy, it's, you know, basically a young, impressionable child that has the hardwiring to be scared of things that it's not sure of, because, you know, mama's going to protect it, but it doesn't know what wants to eat it and what doesn't. So by default, they're predisposed to be scared of things. And so you take them into Home Depot, walking them around, just in the course of your adventure, because you can't control what happens in Home Depot, or when they're going to turn on a forklift, for example, or when the guy on the aisle over is going to knock over a whole bunch of logs or boards and scare the crap out of that poor puppy. And so when that happens and the puppy gets scared, two things happen usually. Number one, we don't need to be in that area anymore, and so we see that it's causing our dog distress, and so we leave the area. And then on the way out, as the puppy's pulling us away, we tell him, "Oh, good boy, it's okay, you're fine, it's okay, don't worry." And we try to reassure him. Now, I know a lot of trainers on the internet will say that you can't reinforce a state of mind, but reinforcing the corresponding behavior validates the state of mind. So if the dog is in a fleeing away state of mind, even if you're unintending to reinforce that, you are reinforcing that away behavior, and that translates to other stuff down the line. And so you take that, you know, 5-month-old puppy who's predisposed to running away from things, because that's what puppies do, they're helpless. You give him an event like that where he thinks he's now the hero because he pulled everybody to safety, because, you know, naturally when we stop, that thing's not there, it's not scary anymore. He looks up, he looks around, he goes, "Whew, that was a close one. You guys are lucky you had me, and you're welcome now. I know what my job is." And so now the dog is happy to, you know, lead people away whenever they encounter something that they're not familiar with, not fond of, whatever, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if we're not aware of it, what happens is the dog starts doing that all the time. They offer it in a bunch of different scenarios, that fear, that away response. And because it works the exact same way every single time, where we go, "Oh, it's okay, buddy, and we don't have to be here anyway, so we're out." We never actually let the dog work through it. So they just become a professional avoidant, where they want to not deal with anything head on. And then if that happens long enough, and you have the right combination of, you know, genetics, because of the different breeds out there, and you have a dog like a German Shepherd or Malinois, King Corso, what have you, and that animal reaches, you know, physical maturity and decides that, hey, instead of running away, I'm just going to make this problem stop, because I'm grown now and I don't have to deal with this shit. Well, that's where that very first time that you go out to Home Depot and the dog, instead of pulling away from whatever's scary, turns at it and goes, "Nah, bark, bark, bark." And the people go, "Oh, okay, not friendly, cool." And they walk away. The dog learns, hey, I don't got to run from shit. I'll just bark at it. It'll go away. Me and the human will get back to our business, and life will be good. And so again, dog has a learning moment and says, "Oh, that's all I got to do to get people to go away that I don't want? Shoot, I could bark at people all day. That's what I'm predisposed for." Then you're driving around, no people around, but they see people in the car next to you. The dog has a bright idea, like, "Well, hey, if I bark at that car with all the people in it, I wonder if that's going to make them go away." So the dog starts barking out the window, and that car turns, we turn, we get separated. Eventually it works, and the dog thinks, "All right, cool, I can chase those things off too." Or if they're outside of the house and they're, you know, just barking at cars going by, people walking by, skateboarders, whatever, people usually don't stop and sit there and go, "Oh, it's okay, buddy," until the dog stops. If they do stop, the dog continues to bark, and they go, "All right, not cool," and they keep on moving. And so, like I said, in the dog's mind, that little bit of like time where they're like, "Oh, hey, buddy," the dog's like, "Nope, keep it moving," and it works. And so, you know, that's where we get these dogs that believe that they can control what we're doing by their behavior because over time they've learned that it works. And that's where for trainers, we're conscious of that and we're aware that that's how dogs operate. And so, like I said, when we create the training scenarios and the training plans for these animals, we do it in such a way where the dog thinks that, I mean, I don't know how everybody does it, but at the highest level, the dog trainers that I've seen, that I've been mentored by, the best ones that I know, when they're creating all their training plans and all of that, they're trying to control the variables they can control until they don't need to anymore. And so if I have, like I said, a dog that's reactive, if I have a dog that is a little impulsive, if I have a dog that's whatever, I can recreate all kinds of lower threshold stress here in this environment between the other dogs that I have in training, the distractions that I have just around the house in general. I have chickens, I got a turtle, and a lot of dogs up here in Northern California haven't seen a big ass tortoise. So that's always funny. Something I share with them toward the end of training when the weather's nice. It's winter right now, so I don't bring her out as much. But in the spring, she's out in the yard a lot, eating grass and doing stuff. And for dogs that have never seen it, it's a good initial assessment of how well, you know, training is quote unquote sticking. It's a good assessment for me as a trainer to see how does the dog do with something new. And so as I'm progressing through training, I'm seeing how does the dog do in these situations versus how were they when they first got here. And so if they started off being, you know, extra barky, extra reactive, kind of anxious, whatever the case may be, throughout training, I'm looking for the intensity and frequency of that response to go down. So before it'll go away, it has to get weaker, right? They got to bark less than the max that they do. But once we get there and we reward the alternative, then we have that kind of baseline for what they should do. And once they're offering what they should do reliably here, then that's where we start going out to other environments and trying to, training is called generalizing, where, you know, I can take that calm, relaxed behavior and I can try to get her to apply that at Home Depot. I can get her to apply that out at the park. And now I always have, you know, room to go up from there. We can go to the park, and as long as manners and everything are being upheld, she can play and she can do stuff. But again, that's predicated on her being able to regulate her impulses and, you know, pay attention and cooperate. Because, like I said, when it's time to be done, it's time to be done. And she's just about done with training now. But when she got here, like typical Huskies do, you give her a recall and she come to probably about 3 or 4 feet away from you, and then she's like, "Meow, I'm out of here." And it was a ha fun game for her to just run and be chased and all the things, which is cool. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll play those games with the dog. Like, I usually don't be the one that chases the dog. I'll chase my own dog sometimes, but for dogs that are used to being chased, they don't ever need to be chased. I'll make them chase me. And once, like I said, we've established kind of what I call an implied recall, where the dog's understanding that they need to stay within just a 30-foot radius of us. We're able to apply that either from here at my yard, out and about in the park, the beach, the river, whatever. And however much kind of reminders the dog needs, and initially, depending on, so again, the kind of habits of the environment come into play. If the dog's been to a park or an area a whole bunch of times and they've so kind of built up a habit of not listening or doing what they want, what you're going to see is that when you go back to that first time, they're going to try to revert back to what's normal. It's the same thing when dogs go home from training for the first time. For the first week or so, the momentum of training, they'll just keep kind of maintaining what we were doing here, that routine of, you know, wake up, morning, whether you do breakfast or a session. Throughout the day, they'll get, you know, bathroom breaks and some playtime, and they come home kind of on that routine. But then once, you know, 10 days, 2 weeks goes by, and the dog's had time to adjust back to, you know, the new owner's routines, depending on if the owner has continued to hold the dog accountable for that time, will be how hard that dog springs back to, you know, whatever their old habits were. And so again, like whenever the dog is having those moments where either they're unsure, they just don't want to listen, how we respond to it is going to make all of the difference in the world in the long run. Because like I said, the dog doesn't understand it. They can't do what they don't understand. So it's important that we spend the time teaching them what those expectations are. But then once they understand the expectations, we have to be able to hold them accountable too, right? So whether the dog's here at the kennel or they're back at the house, my job as the trainer is A, to show the dog here what some productive responses and routines are, and then B, show the owners how I'm able to achieve that and what they need to do to be able to implement some of these things into their own lives. Because everybody lives a little bit different lifestyle. Everybody that goes to work and does the regular 9-to-5 grind still has variances in their routine from family to family and just individual within the house, right? And so the dog has to learn how to adjust to all of those things. But if we give them some good kind of baseline behaviors of this is what to do when there's nothing else to do, like I said, they're generally pretty happy to do that. Like I said, with Denver back there, what you see is a lot of trainers do tethering where they'll stake a dog out inside of the room or inside of like the living room where the dog can't necessarily get access to the owner, but they can still see him. And it's a way to kind of repair or rebuild kennel anxiety if the dog has some separation anxiety from the kennel. And it's a really effective technique at it. Some will use the treat and train to kind of supercharge it. But again, like I said, for me, what I want to do is I want to create something where the dog has to proactively be problem solving. And so at first, the place bed and the food dispenser are reversed, where the place board is over by the door where the dog is going to be inclined to just kind of hang out anyway. And then I'll reward from the other side of the kennel where they go to that other side to get the reward. And then they go back to the door. And then eventually one day it flips where the place board's on the other side away from the door. And so instead of just hovering at the door, trying to get out, trying to hurry up and get to the next thing, now we've created the understanding where the dog gets rewarded for going onto the thing, and at first just putting their feet on there, and then eventually they get bored of waiting for Wally to beep, so they lay down, and then when they do, I'll beep them for that. And so just that kind of desire to go in there and chill and sit and relax, good girl, teaches them that when I'm starting to come over here and I'm starting to fidget with the kennel, that's how we can start to build up some of those manners of, hey, you don't have to just rush out every time we open the door. And so again, like I said, once we build up all of those kind of baselines here at the kennel, I go out into public, and for me, it's an assessment. For the owner, it's a real-time kind of problem-solving instructional, because they get to see, A, that the dog's not going to be perfect, even for as good as the dog has been here at the house and all the improvements that they've made, that expecting the dog to be perfect when we get out into public under variable new kind of distractions is not really realistic. Over time, we can expect them to adjust and do very well, but initially it's not, necessarily something that's super automatic for them. And so as they're here figuring it out, when we go out into public that first time, that's an assessment for me to see. But then as the dog, does whatever they used to do, like running away from the owner when you try to call him back, or not loading up in the car is a common one. Whatever that little thing is that the dog doesn't do or does do that we would like them to either not or to do, going out and working through that in real time so the owners can see, A, like I said, the dog isn't going to be perfect, but this is how we get through it, and this is how we work through it to, A, make it as smooth as possible and safe in the short term, because sometimes you get dogs that get frustrated when you're trying to load them up and they get snappy, or just things like that need to be not in the equation at all. Or you get the dogs that they just are like, nope, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to be lazy, and I know that you're going to pick me up, I know that you're going to cover for me, essentially. And so in either case, for the owner to see how we work through those things is important. And then from there, you take those skills and you apply them until you don't need to anymore. Like I said, for a dog, when Xander first got here, he didn't want to load up at all. No interest in loading up in vehicles. Now, every time we go out, he's like, yo, car ride, can we jump in? And so you can do it. It's just a matter of spending the time to deliberately focus on whatever the thing is that's causing you the heartache, whether it's being able to get your dog to chill out in the kennel and relax, whether it's being able to get your dog to recall to you, and understanding that whatever you work on at the house is going to be, or in the dog's routine environment, is going to be kind of your baseline ceiling proficiency. So it's not going to get any better away from their routine environment than it is at their routine environment. So if I'm here at the house and I'm practicing recalls, one thing I always do with all of us, I make it that very strict, like you come up in front of me and you sit down and then I reward you. And I'm very strict on that criteria here at the house, because when we go out into public, I don't necessarily want the dog to come up and sit down. I want him to come within an arm's reach so I can put a leash on him is usually the thing. And so if I practice here at the house, just being able to come within an arm's reach so I can put a leash on, the dog expects I'm going to put a leash on them, and they don't want to do that. And so I teach them, nope, I don't care if you do want a leash on or not. The expectation is you come up and sit down, and that takes away the dog's flexibility of, all right, well, how close do I have to come? Do I have to go right here? Do I have to go right? And so we take away all of that kind of wiggle room for the dog of, no, you come right here and you sit down. And then when we're out there that first time, I take my treat pouch with me and we introduce, that new environment in the way that we want it. And then the second and third time that we go out there, that's where we're able to, transition away from the extra rewards and the extra treats, because the dog knows what is expected there, and we're able to hold them accountable to it. But we have to be able to do that whole kind of reinforcement cycle or process, and not just only use an e-collar, only use a pinch collar, only use the aversive control to quash behaviors. Because what happens is the dog starts to feel more and more confined, and all of that pressure around them turns into them wanting to walk on eggshells, because they're not sure what it actually is that gets them in trouble. They just understand that there's a higher chance they're going to get in trouble when something goes by that triggers them, and it's not their fault. It's that thing's fault, is the dog's perception. But yeah, just doing some kennel cleaning today. These things back together. Try to keep it minimal and easy, because dogs, when they come over, a lot of them are a little bit stressed out. I deal with a lot of high anxiety or aggressive or some behaviorally challenged dogs, we'll call it. And so a lot of times they get here and they don't want anything to do with me or any of the other dogs in the kennel, which is fine. But that also sometimes comes with some stress diarrhea or vomiting, or some other little non-emergent health complications, but do require me to have to be able to sanitize this thing really quick. So it's kind of like a Rocky gym. It's effective. Like, dogs aren't here for vacation. They're here to get better. And then from a, like I said, just health and welfare standpoint, being able to clean these things efficiently and thoroughly is probably one of the easiest ways to avoid the headaches of not doing it, which are pretty significant. Bacteria and viral outbreaks are never fun. Every now and then you get a bug that would come through the kennels. Dogs would get like real bad diarrhea, and it would just be the raunchiest, rankest, nastiest smell. And that's even with, all of our sanitation protocols and everything else. Knock on wood, the difference here and why my dogs don't get sick is these pets that I'm working with aren't deploying around the world and delivering freedom everywhere that Uncle Sam tells them to. Let it finish drying out. These dogs all have beds right now. Sometimes people get on here and see a dog that doesn't have a bed, and they get all sad or in their feelings, like, oh, that poor baby needs a bed, give him a bed. The only reason I don't give dogs beds is when they chew them up, and it's like protecting them from their self thing. Because there's a lot of dogs that, just don't have that common sense that if they eat the entire foam mattress, it's going to cause an obstruction. They're not going to be able to poop and they're going to die. They don't have that common sense. So while we're working through whatever those issues are, I protect them from themselves by not giving them a bed. And like I said, this whole crew has beds. So once the floor in here is all dry, we're going to throw the beds on, back in the kennels, and get the dogs moved back in. But hope everybody has a good day. I'm going to start doing these a little bit more. I find trying to just make content to be a challenge with the editing and everything. So I'm just going to jump on here and do live streams. Today, right now, it's just cleaning. I'm going to jump on here and do another one of these days where I'm out in the OB yard just working with either my dogs or pet dogs or whatever. But long and short, going to be pivoting over to YouTube and doing more work over here. So trying to make a better experience for dogs in general, not just, you know, the pets that I work with or the dogs that I'm able to work with. I want to help dogs have a better existence in our modern society, because right now, unfortunately, training from a time when society was different isn't working for dogs now. So anyway, hope everybody has a good weekend. Talk to y'all soon.